Assalamualaikum and good afternoon to our Madam Zurina binti Muhammad Nen, and to my fellow classmates. Thank you for joining us today. In this presentation, me and my team that consists of Amirul Sabirin bin Muhammad Azlan, Nik Faizal bin Muhammad Fakhruddin, me myself Muhammad Nohamizah Roslan, Muhammad Alif Akmal bin Muhammad Khairul, and Muhammad Hazim Hazmi bin Adam. We will be exploring the evolution of Malaysia's foreign policy through the lens of its leadership, particularly focusing on the country's prime minister and how their respective tenure have shaped our international relations. From the post-independence era to modern diplomacy, Malaysia's foreign policy has reflected not just national interests, but also the vision and global outlook of its leaders. We will look into the approaches taken by key prime ministers, the challenges they face, and how Malaysia positioned itself in a world influenced by Cold War tensions, globalization, and regional cooperation. By the end of this session, I hope to give you a clearer understanding on how Malaysia's premiership has played a crucial role in crafting a foreign policy that balances national sovereignty, regional diplomacy, and global engagement. Now,
before diving deeper into the foreign policies in Malaysia, I would like to discuss first the very definition of foreign policy. Now, foreign policies can be widely defined as a nation's strategies and decisions in maintaining a relationship with other countries, reflecting on country's national interests, values and goals projected beyond its borders. Operated through multiple tools like diplomacy, trade agreements, peacekeeping and others, will allow a nation to pursue its interests while also maintaining international cooperation and credibility. First, Malaysia's non-alignment and neutrality policy. Introduced under Prime Minister Tun Abdul Razak in the 1970s, this strategy allowed Malaysia to remain independent of Cold War power blocs. We joined the non-aligned movements in 1970, and this helped us pursue pragmatic diplomacy with both the West and communist states. It gave Malaysia flexibility to diversify its partners while avoiding entanglement in external conflicts. Second, our commitment to Asian-centric regionalism. As one of Asia's 5 founding members in 1967, Malaysia has always emphasized regional peace, integration and Asian centrality. We believe regional challenges like economic cooperation or disputes in the South China Sea should be addressed through Asian mechanisms. Malaysia also played a major role in the creation of the Asian Charter in 2008 and the launch of the Asian Economic Community in 2015. Third, Malaysia's early and strategic engagement with China and East Asia. In 1974, we became the first Asian country to establish diplomatic ties with the People's Republic of China. Later, under Mahathir Mohamad, we adopted the Look East policy, learning from Japan and South Korea's development models. Today, China is Malaysia's top trading partner, where we are involved in platforms like ASEAN Plus 3, the East Asia Summit, and the Belt and Road Initiative, though there has raised debates on economic dependence. Fourth, Malaysia's role in Islamic diplomacy. As a leading moderate Muslim country, Malaysia actively promotes values of peace, development and justice in the Islamic world. We've taken strong positions on the Palestinian cause, the Rohingya refugee crisis and Islamophobia. Under Abdullah Badawi, we promoted Islam Hadari, while Mahathir's KL Summit aimed to empower the Muslim world through economic and scientific cooperation. And fifth, our focus on economic diplomacy and trade liberalization. Since the 1990s, foreign policy has been tightly linked to national development. We have signed free trade agreements with Japan, China, Australia and ASEAN, joined multilateral blocs like CPTPP and RCEP. Under Najib Razak, Malaysia aggressively pursued infrastructure diplomacy, especially with China, and positioned itself as a hub for trade, Islamic finance and the halal economy.
Assalamualaikum and a very good day. Today, I will be presenting about Malaysia's foreign policy in the post-independence era, especially during the leadership of the first 3 prime ministers. This period was strongly influenced by global tension and the Cold War between the Western capitalist powers and Eastern communist powers, and had a major impact on how Malaysia positioned itself on the world stage. Now, let's begin with Tunku Abdul Rahman. Malaysia's first Prime Minister from 1957 to 1970. At the time, Malaysia's biggest internal threat was the communist insurgency led by the Malayan Communist Party. Because of this, Tunku adopted a pro-Western anti-communist foreign policy. Malaysia maintained strong ties with the UK, US, and Australia, also with the other Western countries. Tunku also played a key role in the formation of ASEAN in 1967, which helped to unite Southeast Asian countries and reduce the influence of communism in the region. Other major issues during his time include the Indonesia-Malaysia confrontation, and the separation of Singapore from Malaysia back in 1965. These events shaped his strong focus on diplomacy and Western alliance. Now, let's talk about Tun Abdul Razak. When he took over in 1970, he shifted Malaysia's foreign policy from being heavily Western aligned to a more balanced and non-aligned approach. Malaysia joined the non-alignment movement, or better known as NAM, back in 1970, showing that we were no longer choosing sides between East and West. In a bold move, Tun Razak also established the diplomatic relation in China back in 1974, despite the ongoing communist threat in Malaysia. His approach was more pragmatic, putting Malaysia's national interests first while maintaining a peaceful relation with both West and the East. Now, how about Tun Hussein On, who led from 1976 to 1981? He continued this non-aligned foreign policy. He focused on strengthening ASEAN, building good diplomatic relations, and promoting regional peace, especially during the Vietnam War and the Indochina refugee crisis. Domestically, he supported economic growth and national unity, which were also reflected in his foreign policy. He used diplomacy to attract trade and foreign investment. Now, we will move on to the next slide. Now, we will talk about the similarities between the three leaders. And despite their different approaches, the first three prime ministers shared some important similarities, which is they were committed to national unity and harmony, especially after the 1969 racial riots. All rejected communism and took steps to secure Malaysia from its threat. They strongly supported regional cooperation through ASEAN. They practiced pragmatic diplomacy, balancing East and West relations to benefit Malaysia. And finally, all three used foreign policy to support economic development and maintain national security. Now, in summary, Malaysia's foreign policy after independence evolved in three key phases. Early alignment with the West under Tunku Abdul Rahman, shift to non-alignment under Tun Abdul Razak, and stabilization and regional focus under Tun Hussein On. All three leaders contribute to shaping a foreign policy that prioritizes peace, neutrality, security, and economic growth, helping Malaysia navigate a difficult global environment and build a stable international presence. That's all from me. Now let's move on to the next slide.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Alif Akmal bin Muhammad Karun. My matrix number 2024222758. And today I will talk about Dr. Mahathir Mohamad's foreign policy during his tenureship as Prime Minister of Malaysia. Dr. Mahathir Mohamad's tenure as Malaysia Prime Minister start from 1981 to 2003. Marked a pivotal and transformative era in the country's foreign policy. During this period, Malaysia underwent significant political, economic and social change that were reflected in the approach to international relations. Several major global issues and dynamics during Dr. Mahathir Mohamad's tenure as Malaysia Prime Minister from 1981 to 2003 significantly shaped and influenced the orientation of Malaysian foreign policy. This period was marked by rapid globalization, the emergence of new economic powerhouse. The rapid pace of globalization increased Malaysia's exposure to volatile global financial market. The 1997 to 1998 Asian financial crisis was a defining event that deeply affected Malaysia's economy. Mahathir attributed the crisis to external factors such as currency speculation and unregulated capital flow, which led him to advocate for greater regulation of global financial market and to adopt unorthodox measures like capital controls. This experience reinforced his skepticism toward Western-dominated financial institutions and motivated his push for economic independence and South-South cooperation. The end of Cold War shifted global power dynamic, reducing the relevance of old alliances and opening opportunities to new partnerships. Mahathir capitalized on this, diversifying Malaysia's international relations, seeking new markets and alliances beyond traditional Western partners, and strengthening ties with East Asia. At the same time, Mahathir expanded Malaysia's engagement with Muslim-majority countries, reinforcing Malaysia's identity as a moderate Islamic nation and fostering solidarity within the Muslim world. This dual focus on East Asia and the Muslim world allowed Malaysia to carve out more independent and diversified foreign policy paths. Mahathir's foreign policy was characterized by an independent, active and pragmatic stance, which sought to assert Malaysia's sovereignty and national interests amid a rapidly changing global environment. Unlike previous administrations that often aligned closely with Western powers, Mahathir emphasized diversifying Malaysia's diplomatic and economic partnership, particularly by strengthening ties with East Asian countries. Mahathir's foreign policy was marked by a strong sense of autonomy and pragmatism. He sought to reduce Malaysia's dependency on traditional Western allies, instead diversifying diplomatic and economic relationships with non-Western countries. This approach was driven by both his personal ideology and a desire to protect Malaysia's sovereignty in a rapidly globalizing world. Mahathir's pragmatism was evident in his focus on economic interests, often prioritizing trade and development over ideological alignment. The dual emphasis on autonomy and economic pragmatism defined much of Mahathir's foreign policy initiative, including the Look East policy, which encouraged learning from Japan and South Korea economic models, and the push of stronger regional cooperation within ASEAN and beyond. His leadership style and personal conviction also meant that Malaysia's foreign policy was assertive and sometimes confrontational, especially when defending national interests against perceived Western interference. Yet, despite his anti-Western rhetoric, Mahathir's policy remained grounded in practical consideration, balancing ideological posturing with the imperative of economic growth and development. Mahathir was a strong advocate for regional cooperation, especially within ASEAN. He promoted a vision of stronger Asian regionalism and promoted initiatives like the East Asia Economic Council (EAEC). His regional engagement was rooted in the belief that Southeast Asia countries should work together to ensure stability, economic progress, and collective bargaining power on the global stage. However, Mahathir's activism sometimes clashed with the more cautious ASEAN way preferred by other member states. Mahathir positioned Malaysia as a leader among developing nations, championing South-South cooperation. He actively engaged with organizations like the Non-Aligned Movement (NAM), the Organization of Islamic Cooperation (OIC), and the Group of 77. Through this platform, he advocated for the interests of the Global South, emphasizing economic cooperation, technology transfer, and more equitable international order.
Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. Today, I will be presenting two major global issues that shaped Malaysia's foreign policy during the leadership of Tun Abdullah Ahmad Badawi. These issues are globalization and economic competition and the global food and energy crisis of 2007 until 2008. Let's begin with the first one. During Tun Abdullah's time as Prime Minister, the world was moving rapidly towards globalization. Countries were becoming more connected through trade, technology, and investment. Big economic powers like China, Japan, and the United States were leading the global market. For Malaysia, this meant we had to compete internationally to attract investors and sell our product overseas. But this global shift also created problems. Firstly, Malaysia risked falling behind if we didn't keep up with global trends. Secondly, foreign investors might look elsewhere if our economy wasn't strong or attractive enough. Thirdly, our small and medium enterprises, or SME, were struggling to compete globally, especially in terms of technology and productivity. Tun Abdullah's government knew that Malaysia couldn't isolate itself, so he focused on foreign policy strategies to support economic growth. Some of his key actions included strengthening economic diplomacy to promote Malaysia as an attractive investment destination, enhancing regional cooperation with ASEAN countries and East Asian giants like China, Japan, and South Korea. Actively participating in APEC, as Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, and the World Trade Organization to fight for fairer trade rules for developing countries like Malaysia. These moves help Malaysia stay connected to the global economy and ensure we remain competitive during a challenging period. Now, let's move on to the global food and energy crisis that happened between 2007 and 2008. During this time, prices of essential goods like rice, flour, and cooking oil increased sharply across the world. Oil prices also skyrocketed, causing serious pressure on many countries, especially import-dependent nations like Malaysia. The effects on Malaysia were immediate. People were facing rising living costs, and inflation was hitting high. The government had to spend more on subsidies to control prices, which created a heavy burden on national finances. There were growing concerns over food and energy security for the future. To deal with this, Tun Abdullah administration took important steps through French policy. Among them were working closely with Asian countries to ensure a steady food and energy supply for the region, strengthening diplomatic ties with food and energy exporting countries, such as those in the Middle East, raising Malaysia's voice in international platforms like the United Nations, calling for a fairer global food trade system that doesn't disadvantage developing countries. These foreign policy efforts help protect Malaysia from worse impacts and showed how international cooperation was essential during a global crisis. In conclusion, both globalization and the global crisis tested Malaysia's resilience, but under Tun Abdullah Ahmad Badawi's leadership, Malaysia took smart foreign policy steps to adapt, survive, and stay competitive.
We'll be talking about how global events shaped Malaysia's domestic challenges and foreign policy during Najib Razak's term from 2009 to 2018. Specifically, we'll explore the 2008 global financial crisis, the rise of China as a superpower, and how Malaysia went through these developments economically and diplomatically. Let's begin with the 2008 global financial crisis, which marked a turning point for the global economy. Triggered by the collapse of the US housing market, the crisis led to mass bankruptcies, job losses, and a global recession. Western investors pulled back, commodity prices crashed, and trade volume shrank dramatically. In this climate of uncertainty, China's economic ascent accelerated. While the West struggled, China launched its Belt and Road Initiative in 2013, began investing heavily abroad, and emerged as a global power in trade, infrastructure, and diplomacy. It presented an alternative model of state-led development and started challenging the US-led liberal order, especially in Asia. This shift in global power dynamics had direct implications for a mid-sized, trade-dependent country like Malaysia. Malaysia was deeply affected by the global financial downturn. In 2009, its GDP contracted by over 1.5%, exports plummeted, and unemployment rose. As an export-reliant economy, Malaysia's exposure was significant. In response, Najib Razak, who took office in April 2009, implemented a RM60 billion stimulus plan, subsidy rationalization, and later introduced the Goods and Services Tax in 2015 to raise revenue. He also launched the Economic Transformation Program, aimed at turning Malaysia into a high-income nation by 2020. However, these policies triggered public discontent. Many Malaysians felt the GST disproportionately hurt the middle and lower income groups, and trust in the government further eroded with the emergence of the 1MDB scandal, which exposed deep flaws in governance and transparency. At the same time, China filled the economic vacuum left by the West. China companies began investing in large-scale Malaysian infrastructure projects like the East Coast Rail Link, Kuantan Port expansion, and Forest City in Johor. While this helped Malaysia's short-term economic recovery, it also raised serious concerns. Critics warned of debt dependency, lack of transparency, and the possible erosion of national sovereignty. Some even argued that these deals were structured more for political rescue than for public benefit, especially as they appeared to overlap with 1MDB-related transactions. This growing dependence on China became a national debate, and by 2018 contributed to the fall of Barisan Nasional in general elections. Now, let's talk about Malaysia's foreign policy response under Najib, which can be understood in two major thrusts: pro-trade economic diplomacy and Asia-centric regionalism. First, Najib aggressively pursued trade liberalization to revive the economy. Malaysia signed on to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a US-led mega trade pact designed to expand market access and encourage domestic reform. Malaysia also supported China-led initiatives like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and RCEP, showing pragmatism in engaging both the US and China. Najib also promoted Malaysia as a global halal hub and Islamic finance leader, attracting capital from the Gulf and positioning the country as a bridge between the East and the Muslim world. Second, he reinforced Asian centrality as a diplomatic priority. In 2015, Malaysia chaired ASEAN and oversaw the launch of the Asian Economic Community, promoting regional integration and a unified market. In the South China Sea dispute, Najib maintained a non-confrontational approach, asserting Malaysia's maritime claims while avoiding provocation. He supported a code of conduct between ASEAN and China and promoted peaceful dialogue over military action. He also engaged in regional counter-terrorism cooperation and voiced support for humanitarian responses to the Rohingya crisis, even publicly criticizing Myanmar's actions in 2016.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Hazim Azmi bin Adam, and for my part, I will talk about the COVID and the post-COVID era of Prime Minister and their foreign policy. Firstly, we'll start off with Dr. Mahathir Mohamad's second term as Prime Minister of Malaysia from May 2018 to 2020. The global landscape was heavily influenced by the escalating trade conflict between the United States and China. This period was marked by heightened economic nationalism, global uncertainty, and the reconfiguration of trade and investment patterns across the world. For Malaysia, an export-oriented economy deeply embedded in global supply chains, this presented both challenge and opportunities. Under Mahathir's leadership, Malaysia adopted a foreign policy that was pragmatic, non-aligned, and strategically positioned to benefit from the shifting dynamics of global trade. One of the most prominent global scenarios during Mahathir's tenure was the US and China trade war that began in the mid of 2018. The tensions between these two economic superpowers led to the imposition of hundreds of billions of dollars in tariff on each other's goods. The United States, under President Donald Trump, accused China of engaging in unfair trade practices such as forced technology transfers, intellectual property theft, and manipulating its currency to favor exports. The core issue lay in the trade imbalance. The US was importing far more from China than it was exporting. In response, the US sought to rebalance trade through protectionist measures, which China countered with retaliatory tariff. The Tun Dr. Mahathir's foreign policy approach during this period was rooted in the principle of non-alignment. He made it clear that Malaysia would not take sides in major power rivalries, but would instead act based on its own national interests. His administration sought to build and maintain strong relations with both the US and China, carefully avoiding entanglement in their disputes while benefiting from the realignment of trade and investment. This balanced diplomacy allowed Malaysia to sustain access to key markets and avoid any backlash faced by countries that aligned too closely with one side. So, in summary, we could say that the foreign policy of Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad from 2018 to early 2020 was shaped by a volatile global context dominated by the US-China trade war. His administration navigated these complexities through a policy of non-alignment, strategic neutrality, and assertive engagement in international forums. By refusing to take sides and focusing on national interests, Mahathir not only protected Malaysia's economic stability, but also elevated its diplomatic profile. His leadership during this period demonstrated the effectiveness of a foreign policy grounded in pragmatism, independence, and moral clarity. For the next part, I will talk about the Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin's time as the Prime Minister. The world was hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, and it was declared as a global pandemic by the World Health Organization in March 2020. The virus has caused widespread of fear, health emergencies, and economic problems. Countries around the world went into lockdown, restricted travel, and faced pressure on their healthcare system. It became clear that international cooperation, especially for vaccines, was very essential. Malaysia was no exception because the country struggled with rising COVID-19 cases, overcrowded hospitals, and a shortage of medical supplies like PPE and ICU beds. At the same time, the economy also suffered badly. Lockdowns, that is known as Movement Control Orders or MCOs, forced many businesses to shut down. Many small and medium-sized enterprises were especially hard hit, and many people lost their jobs or saw their income drop. The government had to find a balance between saving life and protecting jobs. So, what is the foreign policy? The foreign policy is health diplomacy. Muhyiddin's foreign policy focused mainly on health diplomacy. His government worked closely with international organizations and foreign governments to get vaccines and medical aid. Malaysia joined the COVAX initiative, a global program that aimed to ensure fair access to COVID-19 vaccines for all countries, rich or poor. In addition, Malaysia also held direct talks with countries such as China, the United States, Russia, and members of the European Union to secure vaccine deals. These include such as buying vaccines such as the Sinovac and AstraZeneca, accepting vaccine donation and medical supplies, strengthening diplomatic ties with key partners. All of this strategy allowed Malaysia to build a strong vaccine portfolio and begin mass immunization. Even though global vaccine access was competitive, Malaysia managed to keep up thanks to these international efforts. So, in summary, the COVID-19 pandemic shaped Malaysia's foreign policy under Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin. His administration focused on health diplomacy, global cooperation, and vaccine access. This effort has helped Malaysia to respond to the health crisis and support the economy during one of the toughest periods in modern history. Now, for Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob, he also became the Prime Minister of Malaysia during a very challenging time. His government had to focus on helping the country to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic while dealing with new global problems such as the Russia and Ukraine war. The foreign policy played a key role in managing the economic issues, building partnerships, and keeping Malaysia's interests safe. So, what is the global issue that is faced by Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob? When he took the office, the world had started shifting from lockdowns to living with COVID-19. The focus was on vaccinations, reopening borders, and restarting the economy. Malaysia accelerated its vaccination efforts and worked toward an economic recovery. But in early 2022, the Russia-Ukraine war created new global problems. The war disrupted energy and food supplies. This led to higher prices in worldwide. For Malaysia, this meant an increased cost for fuels and food, adding pressure on households and the economy. So, Malaysia faced several serious problems. Many people were still unemployed after long business closures. Prices for food, fuel, and basic goods kept rising. And many small businesses and investors faced an ongoing uncertainty because Malaysia relies heavily on all of these things. So, what is the foreign policy that is implemented by Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob? So, he focused more on economic diplomacy, using foreign relations to boost the economy. His foreign policy slogan was Keluarga Malaysia, Keluarga Dunia, that promote Malaysia as a friendly and stable partners. What are some of the key efforts that is included? It helps to strengthen the trade with China and Japan, especially in technology and investment. He also helps with working with Middle Eastern countries in areas like halal products and Islamic finance. It also helps to promote trade within the ASEAN to support regional economic recovery. So, all of this have helped Malaysia to be seen as a more peaceful and responsible country in Southeast Asia. So in short, what we could say is that Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob foreign policy aimed to support Malaysia's post-pandemic recovery, attract investment and strengthen regional partnerships. Even though his time as Prime Minister was short, he has helped to lay the groundwork for economic rebuilding and international cooperation during a time of global uncertainty. Finally, I will talk about Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim. Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim becomes Malaysia's 10th Prime Minister in November of 2022. He took the office during a time of major global challenges that includes the rising tensions between world powers, war in Europe and economic uncertainty. In this situation, Anwar has followed a foreign policy based on strategic autonomy, meaning Malaysia makes decisions based on its own national interests, not by taking sides in big power rivalries. So, there are two major global issues that is faced by Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim. First one is the Russia-Ukraine war. This ongoing war has caused problems such as rising fuel and food prices by disrupting the global energy and grain supplies. Malaysia, which imports many goods, has also felt the effect, especially in terms of higher living costs. So, secondly, the US and China rivalry. The growing competition between the United States and China over trade, technology and influence, especially in Asia, has created a global tension. Malaysia and other Southeast Asian countries are caught in the middle and must handle both relationships carefully. So, what has the challenges that has been caused by all of these global issues? There is high inflation, which means food became more expensive, fuel and basic goods also become very expensive. These problems has threatened Malaysia's trade, economy and regional peace. So, what is the foreign policy and approach that has been made? Anwar Ibrahim foreign policy focus on balance and independence. He promotes that strategic autonomy, which is Malaysia choose its own path without taking sides in the US conflict China. It's also a constructive engagement. Malaysia cooperates with both the US and China but protects its own national interests. It's also a non-alignment policy because Malaysia stays neutral but active in promoting peace and stability. This approach builds on Malaysia's tradition of diplomacy and independence in global affairs. So, Anwar Ibrahim uses foreign policy to boost Malaysia's economy. He focused on attracting investments in areas such as green technology, semiconductors and electronics, and also digital economy. To do this, he has visited many countries such as China, Japan, and Saudi Arabia, and also the Europe, in order to promote that Malaysia is a stable and trustworthy place to invest. His message to the world is Malaysia is open for business on fair and sustainable terms. Anwar also supports strong cooperation within ASEAN. His priorities includes that helping to solve the Myanmar crisis, supporting peaceful solutions in the South China Sea, and also strengthening ASEAN's role in regional trade and economic recovery. He wants Southeast Asia to be peaceful and united, not a place for big competition. So, in summary, we could say that Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim foreign policy focuses more on balance, independence and smart diplomacy. He is helping Malaysia stay neutral in global conflicts while building strong economic ties and protecting national interests. His leadership also shows Malaysia's desire to be a respected, peaceful, and forward-looking country in today's complex world.